Welcome to our webinar and thanks for joining. Today, we're going to talk about why the middleware and integration market has fundamentally shifted from legacy iPaaS through to enterprise orchestration and now enterprise AI orchestration, and what that means practically for organizations like yours. You mean you have attempted to understand how to relieve yourselves of legacy middleware platforms. Sorry, Colin, if you hit the next slide. Great. So just introducing myself, I'm a co-founder and CEO of Virtuoso Partners. And I'm coming at this from the perspective of systems integrator and delivery partner. We work directly with enterprise clients, helping them to make this transition. For a quick intro.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Yeah, so Colin Lennon, I'm a senior technical architect in the professional services team in Workato. So, working with customers to use the platform, customers who are onboarding onto the platform, helping them to adopt Workato, set up their practice, and make sure they're following, our standards, our best practices. Also, working with customers who are migrating from other platforms as well. That's a big part of my role. And yeah, thinking about that kind of evolution of the iPaaS market, Ben, I started back a long time ago now, even before iPaaS, with Oracle Fusion Middleware, so SOA Suite, Service Bus, and then moved on to working with MuleSoft. I was at MuleSoft for 5 years previously before joining Workato. So, working on that kind of like first iteration of iPaaS, I guess. And now I've been with Workato for just under 2 years. So yeah, it's
So from
a journey
enterprise
I've
to
kind
the
of lived.
bus and up.
Yes, exactly.
Very good. Excellent. So I guess, Colin, based on that experience, good for you to kick us off just around some of the characteristics, given your experience in the legacy iPaaS domain. You know, walk me through the sort of main points really around some of the challenges that you see in customers.
Yeah. So I think one key thing I would call out is that on legacy iPaaS systems or platforms, the total cost of ownership tends to be quite high. And I think complexity is probably the main driver of that. So legacy platforms tend to be complex for developers. So, to actually implement solutions on these older iPaaS platforms, generally the persona is a developer, someone who's maybe from a Java development background, for example. So there's complexity there in terms of development and delivery of solutions, also in terms of operations as well. So these platforms, yes, they are, integration platform as a service, but they're not cloud native. Generally, they started off as, a runtime that you could run yourself, you could host it yourself, and they've kind of they've been evolved or adapted to become, a platform as a service. So not really built for the cloud. And I think you can really, as a customer, you can really see that legacy coming through when you have to do things like manage runtime version upgrades, patching, monitoring, all this kind of stuff tends to be quite intensive for customers. Even, for example, like Java upgrades can be, a really big lift for customers on what should be a platform as a service. So I see that as quite a big drawback, I guess, of these legacy platforms. And I think all of that leads to limited business agility. So it's harder to deliver solutions on these platforms, which means more effort and also longer time to market. And I think to contrast that with Workato, we started off as a cloud native platform from day one. We are literally built for the cloud. Also low code, no code. And so I think the range of personas who can contribute to implementing solutions on Workato is much broader. It doesn't need to be, people from a developer background. It can also be more business focused people, business analysts, for example, can contribute. So that really broadens and kind of democratizes access to the platform. I think the fact that it's cloud native also means that in terms of operations, it's much simpler. So you don't need to worry about managing patching, runtime upgrades, all that kind of thing. It is genuinely provided as part of the service. And I think also, you know, if you have a look at some of the recent research from Gartner, for example, they're calling out that we're really evolving the platform quite significantly at the moment, both in terms of like traditional integration and orchestration capabilities, but also with AI.
Yeah, yeah, that's very evident in the platform that we see and work with on behalf of clients. And I think the points you made there are really valid. We are consistently seeing in the enterprise customers that we're engaged with, and some of the corporates as well that have picked up legacy platforms, that the customers are frustrated by being constrained to those upgrade paths and those legacy runtime upgrade paths, where those platforms that were not cloud native have been lifted up to cloud in their current architecture guides, and even with some of the more modern versions not being able to fully leverage AI in the development environment, let alone in how they orchestrate AI, and that always on, always up to date platform is really the concrete differentiator. I think those stats as well, just on the my right hand side, I don't think anyone else has left, but they're quite interesting. They come from a spread of about 46 customers, and the reduction in TCO, that's kind of covering a combination of the services partner or internal resources, licensing, and then any infrastructure resource considerations. And so operational costs you can really measure with hard metrics. But the big enabler is that faster development and deployment time. So that's a comparison with MuleSoft, because there is a growing roster of customers on the Workato side that are moving off of that platform.
Yeah,
perhaps we can move on to a little bit of an overview of the composition of the platform, the architecture.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think we actually have a quote from a customer coming up towards the end of the deck, which talks about the user experience as well. I think something that's really noticeable when you're coming from another platform to Workato is, excuse me, it really is a genuinely unified experience. I think a lot of other platforms have grown their capabilities and broadened their capabilities through acquisitions, so that they've bought a company or bought a capability from another company and then tried to kind of augment it into their existing platform, which can be a good option. But I think in a lot of cases you can really feel that as a user, that the experience isn't unified and you don't have that consistency across different parts of the platform. Whereas with Workato, it's been much more of a look, we've grown the platform ourselves. We haven't added functionality through acquisition. Yes, we do partner with other organizations to provide extension capabilities, but the platform itself is something that we've built up over the years ourselves. And I think that really is evident to users when they see how consistent the experience is across the different parts of the platform.
Yeah, and you don't need to be subject to a legacy platform to suffer from productivity challenges when you have a fragmented design experience and control plane, right? I think it's fair to say trying to use the combination of integration services that exist within the hyperscalers that they make available and label under the moniker of an iPaaS, is that you can end up in the same tangle trying to manage governance, speed of delivery, and skills, and certainly that UI development environment that EA on this slide are praising highly is really that enabler of the speed and the power, which you see on the sort of left and right hand pillars of this component stack. Speed enabled by that IDE, but also by the Gen AI assisted development, availability of tons and tons of connectors, the
Yeah,
construct that you design, and that elastic auto scaling serverless side of things, so that you're not having to consider the operational build before you promote something into live. So yeah,
yeah.
actually, do you want to talk us through the sort of the layers of capability?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks, Ben. So yeah, I think starting at the bottom of the graphic here, really the fundamental foundation, I would say, of our platform is our connectivity layer. So we have literally thousands of connectors to SaaS systems, on-premise systems. So you can see the logos there for Workday, Salesforce, SAP, for example. Also to data warehouses, data lakes, to different database systems as well, uh, SFTP, file servers, everything that you would expect will be there. So yeah, literally thousands of pre-built connectors available to our customers. There's also the ability to create your own connectors. So we have an SDK that allows you to create your own connectors. I guess on the next slide, I'll maybe talk about how that is actually becoming easier to do with the AI features that we're now providing as well. So yeah, the connectivity layer really provides the foundation to everything else that we built on top of that. So in the orchestrate layer, really, I guess what we're talking about here is iPaaS, but with the additional features on top of iPaaS, which we describe as enterprise orchestration. So what kind of things would you expect to have from a traditional iPaaS platform? So the ability to integrate application A to application B using connectors for the source system, the target system. So yeah, absolutely, that's there. You can also create integrations and expose them as APIs so that your consuming applications can make API calls to trigger your integration. So yes, again, that's there. We also have support for uh, traditional integration patterns like event-driven integration, pub/sub. So all the components are there for all of that traditional like iPaaS type integration. But on top of that, we also have additional capabilities that you don't generally see in other iPaaS platforms. And a good example of this, I think, is if you think about an integration flow, we implement our integration flows in assets called recipes, but you can think of a recipe as being like a flow. But typically, a flow is a part of a wider business process, and often there will be some kind of human involvement in that business process as well. So with Workato, we actually have features to go beyond just the app to app integration aspect of it, and you can actually implement the entire business process and bring that human in the loop aspect of it into Workato as well. So we have low-code apps, Workato apps, which is a low-code application platform. You can easily build like web user interfaces for people to participate in. It could be for example, like invoice processing and approval. You could have an integration which is doing the fetching of the invoices, maybe some initial validation, data transformation, but then also creating tasks for humans to perform to maybe approve actions before they actually take effect in the target system. So yeah, you can create these web user interfaces using Workato apps. You can also use our workflow bots, so you can integrate Workato with Slack or Teams, and then users can actually directly collaborate with your integration flow in Slack or Teams and view their tasks, perform actions, and so on. So I guess when we talk about enterprise orchestration, that's really what we're meaning. It's the broadening of the footprint of iPaaS beyond just the traditional like app to app or systems integration, but actually to cover the wider business process or business workflow.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
And I think that human in the loop piece is really interesting in so much as some of the constraints that we encounter clients handling with legacy integration platforms, particularly around error handling and triage.
Mm.
Typically, if there's an event between a application A and B or downstream C, is that this affects business in the work environment and what the users do. And so the
Yeah.
ability to bring people into the conversation or the process or handle those in a much more elegant way rather than just log reporting, exception reports, and email notifications is such a game changer. So you're able to deal with the edges, which is really powerful. So um, and we haven't really touched on the AI development experience here yet, but perhaps it's a good time to talk about Aero from Workato, which is actually starting to encroach on territory that organizations like ours, as the system integrator role, the enterprise and solution architecture advisors have traditionally occupied. That's not even hyperbole either. And
Yeah.
on some hand, you might look at it and go, well, if you're in system integrator's shoes, that's a bad thing. But it's creating a new level of collaboration ability between system integrator and the client through empowering the client. So perhaps, Colin, you could tell us a bit more about what that does.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So I think AI is affecting the the entire world, really, isn't it? In so many different ways, and certainly the like enterprise orchestration market is no different. Um, I think just to kind of tie up the human in the loop aspect of this, I think actually the the features that we have around like incorporating users, incorporating humans into workflows was originally built in more of a kind of traditional enterprise orchestration sense. But actually, I think it's a really good positions us really well for the move into AI as well, because we all know that AI is as impressive as the advances in AI are and continue to be. It's not deterministic, and there's always going to be scenarios where you maybe want to have like a review step or a validation step before you actually want the AI to take action in a system of record. And I think that's another really good use of the human in the loop pattern, where you can have an LLM recommending actions or producing like draft documentation, for example, but then you have that human involvement to validate that the recommendation created by the LLM or the summary created by the LLM is accurate, and being able to make any modifications before actually taking action in a system of record. So I
Yeah,
think
very
we're
powerful.
and I think that will serve us well as we move more into AI orchestration. So I think really there's two broad ways that Workato is really being impacted by and evolving our platform based on agentic AI. So we have this agentic layer, which you can see in the diagram here. So with Workato, you can build genies. So these are agents. The name that we use in Workato for agents that you build in our platform are genies. So you can build your own agents in Workato. We have some pre-built agents as well for common like business use cases. So that's now possible. You can also build your own MCP servers, but you don't have to use Workato, right? You don't have to use uh, Workato Genies as the technology to create your agents. You can create your agents in any tool that you like, but then you can use Workato as the kind of like the connectivity layer to connect your agent to your systems of record. So to have that connection between your agent and your or between your LLM and your systems of record, but in a way that's more controlled and governed and visible and observable. So that's a really big focus, I would say, at the moment is the capabilities around MCP. We really see Workato as becoming the I guess you could say the control plane and the execution plane for enterprise
Yeah.
MCP. And I'll come on to that a little bit more in a second. So that's the first aspect of it. But yeah, like you say, Ben, the second aspect is we're really baking AI into the platform itself. So this is where Aero comes in. So Aero, like you say, Ben, is a you can kind of think of it as a like an AI powered solution architect that you can work with as a user of the platform. So traditionally, you would be going into the platform and like, creating flows manually, dragging and dropping different components onto the palette, connecting them, configuring uh, your rules, your conditional logic, your connections to systems. But with Aero, actually, the starting point can be like natural language. You can have a conversation with Aero, kind of like a co-pilot type experience. You can provide it with a requirements document describing what you need to implement in Workato. And it doesn't need to be technical. It can be more of a like a business requirements document. And Aero can take that, analyze the requirements. It's been trained on our best practices, our recommended integration patterns, our naming standards, all that kind of thing. So Aero is able to take those requirements, assess them, and create a blueprint of the assets that it believes need to be created to implement those requirements on the platform. So the blueprint will be a diagram showing you the recipes, the connections, maybe some like business rules, data tables, whatever it thinks needs to be created. At that point, you've got the chance to kind of continue the conversation with Aero, so you can refine the blueprint before finally giving the go ahead, and then it will go ahead and create these assets for you. So yeah, really changing I guess, the developer experience quite significantly. It can really accelerate the process of getting these assets created on the platform. And then of course, when the recipes and the data tables and the other assets are created, you can continue the conversation with Aero to refine them, but they are like standard assets on the platform. You can modify them yourself as well. So, you have the choice of how much you want to depend on Aero versus how much you want to build yourself.
Yeah, and it's quite powerful as an assistive capability to help clients who are used to working in one target operating model for a SOA style integration middleware,
Yeah,
really interpret the range of options around architecture that can be accommodated within Workato that allow them at the end of the day. If, for example, you're going to be cheap, um, could be done quicker style, then you're able to envision those having to have the D in Workato and get more done faster. So we're definitely seeing that from the SI side.
yeah,
But
yeah,
there's
yeah,
now a good time to go into a little show and tell.
yeah, yeah, absolutely, yeah. So I mentioned MCP earlier, and our focus at Workato on enterprise MCP. I will just stop sharing briefly, and I'll reshare my entire window so that I can show you this quick demo here. Okay, so all right, hopefully you can see ChatGPT.
Yeah,
Yes,
gotcha.
excellent. Okay, so what I've got here is in my Workato workspace here, I've created an MCP server called Salesforce Sales Explorer. So this is an MCP server that we have pre-built and provided to our customers. Um, we've actually got a lot of, I couldn't tell you the exact number because it's increasing almost on a daily basis, but we've got a lot of pre-built MCP servers. You do also have the option of bringing your own MCP servers as well. So, if as a Salesforce customer, of course, there will be MCPs provided directly by Salesforce, and you can use them
Of course.
in Workato as well. But here, yes, I've got this MCP server configured, and you can see what I did just for the purposes of this demo is um, there are two tools which I've enabled, so get current user and search accounts, but there are lots of other tools here which I've left inactive. Right. So if I connect this MCP server to ChatGPT, I think the really relevant thing here, I think, is that when I connect, it's actually, it's doing the OAuth flow. So I'm not connecting as a service account here. I'm actually connecting as like a verified user. So we call this verified user access, or sometimes runtime user connections. In the platform, it's
Yep.
actually listed as runtime user connections. But yeah, what I can show you here is now that that's connected, here in the platform, you can see that there's this runtime user connection here for my specific user. And what this means is that in ChatGPT, when I communicate with Salesforce via the MCP server, it's actually authorized as me. It's going to allow me to perform the actions and see the records that I have access to based on my Salesforce user account and based on the roles and permissions that are configured for me in Salesforce. So, for example, I can just say, who am I logged in as? And we should see that it's able to list my own username. Just while we're doing that, I'm going to go back to the MCP server. So the other tool that I had enabled was to search accounts. Okay, so here we go. It's telling me that I'm logged into Salesforce as myself. And it's given me my email address and user ID, so that's all good. So let's have a look at accounts. So I'll say, show me a list of all Salesforce accounts. So it's calling the MCP server. It's identifying that we do have a tool available to list the accounts. And here we go. Here's a list of accounts. But if I ask for leads, let's see what happens here. Okay, so you can see here basically what it's saying is that the MCP server provides two tools, two skills, if you like, to look up the current user and to search for accounts. My user does have access to view leads in Salesforce, and I could log into the Salesforce UI and see those. But at the MCP layer, so here in Workato, I've only activated these two skills. I haven't activated the skill to search for leads. So I guess what this shows is you can use Workato in your as your like enterprise MCP control plane to give you that governance and control about what your users can do when they're using an LLM and they're connecting to your systems of record through MCP servers. There's actually a really nice graphic on our website, which I just wanted to quickly touch on. So you can see, I think for anyone who has a background in integration, the parallels here are really obvious. So, you can connect your LLM to lots of different MCP servers, but you get something that looks very much like the kind of spaghetti code problem that we talk about in traditional integration, where we don't really have a central place to govern and manage and control what's happening. Whereas with Workato Enterprise MCP, it provides us with that governance layer, a little bit more like the role of an iPaaS or maybe an API management platform in the integration space. So in terms of observability, I can also switch into logs here. And along with everything else that's happening in Workato, there might be lots of other processes like app-to-app integrations or whatever, but I can also see what's happening in terms of my MCP server. So here I can see this was me checking who I was logged in as, first of all, and then getting a list of accounts in Salesforce. So you've got that observability available as well. And a new feature we've got coming, again, very analogous to the API management principle, is MCP proxies. So organizations are going to have access to MCPs provided by all of the different SaaS platforms that the organization uses, right? But to be able to use those MCPs, but kind of govern access to them and manage them centrally in Workato and proxy access to them through Workato is going to be really hugely powerful, I think, when it comes to governance, control, observability.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. And actually, as a Salesforce house ourselves, um, the MCPs that you get off the shelf are often, they'll allow you to surface search results and capabilities around RAG, but actually most organizations have built custom objects, and Salesforce is just one example of that. So as you look to take action and the user base starts to expect the ability for users to take action, having the ability to define those deterministic skills and pathways
Yeah,
is top of the list for every client. So they're going deeper than the surface level of capability available through those existing MCPs. The thing that we find really interesting around the client dialogue at the moment regarding AI is that the conventional integration platform, product owner, and management team is now having to respond to this demand as the gatekeeper of programmatic access to large business systems and, sometimes legacy business systems.
yeah,
And so having tooling that enables them to move from being the department of no or the department of slow to a business unit that can respond to and facilitate agentic build pathways, whilst also having an orchestration capability that delivers everything that the core iPaaS or ESB, middleware, whatever we want to call it, did, is a huge advantage.
yeah, yeah, absolutely, yeah, yeah, definitely.
I think there's
Um,
only one other thing we wanted to touch on here, which was governance and that
yes,
skills transformation, right? So how teams who have been working with, let's say, a TIBCO platform or a MuleSoft platform and have dyed in the wool around SOA style architecture, everything has to be an API.
yeah,
What we find really advantageous is the gears framework from Workato. So essentially a framework for clients to evolve their target operating models to take advantage of these new methods and capabilities. You talk us through just in a hot minute or two what your experience has been with that.
yeah, yeah, absolutely, yeah. I'll move on to the next slide for now, but maybe switch back just for a second. So yeah, other we've talked a lot about other platforms, iPaaS platforms. It's not just a platform though. Often other organizations have a different view or of how these platforms should be used, right? A different methodology. Um, I think lots of people will be very familiar with the concept of API led, where basically every component is an API, not just at the entry point, but even in the different layers within your integration platforms. You create APIs which should over time become reusable. And the idea is that you build towards having this like composability. Great in
Yeah,
theory, but I think a lot of organizations are starting to realize that actually it's a very kind of heavy approach to integration. It's not very agile. It takes much longer to build out these components which are focused on reuse. And then actually organizations going back who have been through this journey are finding that they didn't really achieve the level of reuse that they hoped. Um,
yeah,
and so, yeah, I think there's lots of different ways to do this. I think to go back to the previous slide just briefly. I think in the context of migrations, Hero is also going to be very very beneficial. I've talked about the ability to provide Aero with a requirements document and for it to start building out a blueprint of the solution based on the requirements document. And that can be useful for like new use cases, but it can be very useful when you're migrating from other iPaaS platforms as well. You can,
totally.
provide like the specification or the requirements document for existing integrations that you might have running on another platform or maybe in custom code. The real benefit here is that Aero is not going to it's not going to do the equivalent of a lift and shift, right? It's not going to carry across the the integration pattern and the techniques implemented in your old system. What it's going to do is, based on the requirements, it's going to identify the most appropriate integration pattern and the most appropriate tools and features to use in Workato for those requirements. And often those tools are not the same as the tools that you would use in other platforms.
No.
So I think with Aero, it really helps to avoid the problems that can traditionally come with like lift and shift migrations, where you're kind of just taking like technical debt from one place to another sometimes.
Yep.
So yeah, I think it's going to be hugely beneficial when it comes to that.
Would agree. I would agree.
But yeah, I
So
think coming on to like the development, the experience of like moving from other platforms to Workato. I mean, my experience was I realized that a lot of the components and functionality that you really need to implement integrations in an organization are not provided out of the box by most other platforms, whereas Workato has a lot of features and capabilities that I guess kind of wrap around the core iPaaS capabilities. So things like really advanced features for error reporting, error logging, recovering from errors, repeating jobs which have failed. So all that kind of thing completely built into the platform and available to all customers. Um, I think the
so
DevOps
dealing
stuff
with the sort of constraints around
yeah,
item potency framing and the things that you can end up spinning your wheels on for a long, long time in your architectural designs. They're kind of handled by design implicitly.
yeah, yeah, exactly, yeah. And I think just the user experience, when I first spent some time using Workato, I was kind of blown away by just how fast it was to, you can spin up a working like proof of concept in hours, literally hours rather than days, which is really phenomenal compared to other platforms. So that kind of blew me away, to be honest. Yeah, I guess you'll probably have some experience from the organizations you're working with as well, Ben. Do they feel the same? Do you see the same benefits?
Yeah, I think actually if you start off at the early part of the cycle, what we tend to engage with clients on is they have a jaded perspective on what integration middleware involves. And so they don't expect us to be able to instantiate a platform that can handle real world scenarios.
Hmm.
But you can, it's instant on. And so that
Yeah,
just at that sort of trail perspective, it's incredibly powerful because you have a solution that is unthrottled, full feature. Um, but it means that you can really actually stress test it within reason, of course, to fair usage parameters.
yeah,
And so that has been quite standout, as well as being able to just connect up to sandbox environments in most of the major applications so quickly. So
yeah,
that sort of try piece, um, it means the POC is almost a pass. It's really moving that to a proof of value, and so arguably that is 10x faster. From a build perspective, for sure we see that much quicker. Not only having the AI assisted IDE, but also the broad availability of this community recipes, free build work that people share. That it's not always going to be entirely reusable, but there's so much knowledge to lean on and parts of patterns, bits and pieces of the construct of what you're after. Someone's done it
yeah,
before, probably overcome it, and it's there in the systematic community, ready for reuse. There isn't any big challenge to operationalize and build those things out. And then from a deployment perspective as well, I mean, having worked on other platforms, the deployment side is a consideration, not only in the context of how you resource it from an infrastructure perspective, but also from a licensing perspective. What we tend to see is the clients who have been licensed with multiple cores, multiple instances to be able to cater for all seasons,
yeah,
have this substantially reduced bill of materials for both licensing and infrastructure because of elastic auto scaling. And I think pretty much every time it's a phenomenal architecture. So that deployment phase, particularly as you start to get through the backlog of a big reference architecture, and there are some really, really meaty, really key integrations build. You're not having to hit and look back at what have you licensed running on, and find yourselves in the throes of a cycle again with the vendor. It's just there. So that is a really, that 0 days is not arbitrary. You could argue a lot of the numbers in here are arbitrary and subject to opinion, but this is a lived experience. And from an operation perspective, that built-in error recovery piece is, as we pointed out, it's durable cursors, lots of features that I won't butcher for now, that mean you're not having to look at what happened in the source event and try and recreate it. Yeah. And it's holding a position, which is quite incredible. But that operate piece, the big thing we see with clients that have adopted Workato over some of the legacy platforms is that you get to a certain size of bloat with integration on a SOA-based platform, whereby your team is then inherently managing the technical debt that they have built, and they don't have room or capacity to serve the business with new requirements. Yeah. And so that's really what it unlocks, is rather than being a maintenance mode department, is that actually they're able to serve work. You combine that with the speed of delivery, it's really, really powerful. And actually, I think the little accolade here from HubSpot and Canva are really interesting in terms of how that supports from a return on investment perspective. If you compound all of those time savings, infrastructure, I think it's really substantial. I mean, staggering is another point actually on the Canva side is, so the bar for engineering business teams, and democratization isn't for everyone. I think that the whole system developer terminology has the possibility to make people's hair on the back of their neck stand up if you come from an enterprise architecture background. But what it is allowing you to do, if you have a lot of technical teams, you don't just have to concentrate the integration orchestration skills in one part of the IT team. You can operate a much more federated value model, so that it almost becomes the business partner to the organization because it can be responsive.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think, I think the fact that it's maybe not the most exciting kind of topic to think of, but the stuff that you mentioned around like durable cursors and the fact that you can, jobs are persisted and you can rerun jobs, it's not exciting. It's not, features that are going to capture people's imagination. But the fact that all of this is provided out of the box just means it's time saved. You would otherwise be building solutions where you actually have to implement these features for reliability, for scalability, for monitoring and operations. But with that all being provided out of the box, actually you can focus on the business requirements, the business functionality that's required.
Correct. Yeah, you're spot on.
Yeah.
And then spent the what's wrong is we'll know that pain. And so I guess this point is really quite interesting. I mean, Atlassian, huge organization, but I think it's quite powerful to emphasize the scale of possibility. And when we think about integration in the sort of SOA legacy platform context, is that orchestration and automation are sort of add-on features rather than inherently baked into it. So that sort of multi-step process automation that allows you to really deliver meaning impact at a low level in the organization. down to business processes. It's that integer of process automation and integration that is orchestration at the end of the day, and Workato definitely uniquely unlocks that in our experience.
Yeah.
So lots of different things where you can come back and say, well, these are the metrics for impact. The empowering 49 finance team member piece to automate is really interesting as well. And Atlassian are uniquely aggressive in their citizen developer approach. The platform's sort of federated workspace model allows you to safely deploy a workspace with a limited range of tools and controls that allows different teams in the organization to self-serve. So if you have a finance team or a operations team where you have attached an IT business partner type role, it is possible to empower but also govern how those users are doing it, and that's the lived experience for Atlassian. Certainly on the other quote we've got here, which is Samsara. I mean that's not arbitrary numbers, right? That's straight from the horse's mouth, no pun intended, with our little mule poking his head out of the slide, but 2x faster and the equivalent of 3 FTE added that can serve the business, which is a hugely powerful advantage. But I mean that's kind of congruent with our experience. But I don't know if there's anything perhaps that you're seeing in some of the accounts that you work on, because I only see the stuff that VP are engaged with on our side, and Colin, you're working across best practice across multiple live customers going through this process as well. Any other sort of takeaways you want to add to it?
Yeah, I mean, broadly, I see very similar patterns. Yeah, I think, like I highlighted, I think AI is becoming more and more of a consideration, not just in terms of like our platform providing AI features, but I think the role of AI in the integration space is becoming a much more significant thing. So I'm starting to see some customers really leveraging AI to build, to act as their kind of like solution architect, to actually create integrations, maybe not completely 100% ready for production, but to maybe get integrations like 65-70% of the way there, just based on requirements documents and based on conversations using natural language, and then the remaining kind of 30-35% can be tweaking what's being produced by Aero to align with an organization's specific requirement. So I think that's huge. I think the metrics we're talking about here around faster development are actually not really factoring in the extra acceleration that Aero and these AI capabilities are now going to be bringing to the platform as well. So if anything, I think organizations are going to be able to go even faster.
Yeah, very powerful stuff. And I think that the Aero stuff, the AI stuff, is leveling the playing field. So it's no longer, you could say turkeys don't vote for Christmas if you're a systems integrator like us, but I think it's allowing you to collaborate and do things faster if you have that hybrid operating model with a systems integrator partner. So it's giving the advocate for the client, helping them ideate and build new abilities. So yeah, very powerful.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that brings us to a bit of a wrap up. So thank you for attending. If you're considering a migration or you're frustrated with where you are on your current integration platform, then scan the QR code and connect with me, and it'll give you a view on what that engagement looks like. There's genuinely no pressure. We're offering a free migration assessment, and that is with experts from VP and Workato, where we are doing, if you will, not necessarily aero powered, but a lightweight current state assessment to give you a actionable roadmap and high level approach to replatforming. We're also giving a iPath migration playbook, which is downloadable, and it covers our experience and some of Workato's team on how leading teams are making the switch. And as I alluded to earlier, the POC side of things, or proof of value, we're able to replicate complex scenarios in your non-production environments in quite literally a matter of days. So it's a very low commitment way to see what's actually possible. But before we wrap up, might be worth just taking stock and seeing if we have any questions. Oh, I've got one here, which is how long does a typical MuleSoft to Workato migration take, and what are the biggest risks to watch out for? I'll let Colin, you have a crack at that since you've been a MuleSoft acolyte in the past. So, what's your take? I have
Yeah,
a view on my side.
yeah. I mean, I think obviously it's going to be very dependent on the footprint of the MuleSoft estate in your organization. But what I would say is, in terms of like biggest risks to look out for, pitfalls to look out for, I think it's going back to something I touched on before. I think Workato is a very different platform from MuleSoft. We've talked about how it's cloud native, built for the cloud from day one, whereas MuleSoft started out as a like Mule ESB initially, which you could install on your own infrastructure, and then has evolved into something that has like this kind of cloud offering wrapped around it. But really, at the core, it's still this Mule enterprise service bus. So, given all of that, I think the biggest risk is approaching a migration as like a lift and shift. So, you have an integration between systems and MuleSoft. You probably have, if you followed MuleSoft's API-led methodology, various different APIs all communicating with each other across different, experience, process, and system layers. Yeah, you could move that across to Workato as is. We have the technical capabilities to run integrations in that way as well. But I would say to leverage the features that Workato has, the features that are unique to Workato, really rather than lift and shift, it's actually better to kind of like re-architect or maybe lift and optimize if you want to kind of find the middle ground. And I think again that's where Aero is going to be very helpful as well, because by providing like non-technical business requirements, Aero is going to be able to give you a blueprint of the best way to architect this in Workato, leveraging our gears methodology, our best practices, standards, naming standards, all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, we've had a customer recently in Europe who has migrated very successfully from MuleSoft to Workato with some support from our professional services team, but actually they have mainly done it, in-house alongside a partner. So professional services has been involved kind of initially, and then with a little bit of oversight as the program progresses. But actually, this customer has mainly just worked with their own resources and with their partner, and yeah, they've been able to successfully migrate from MuleSoft in, I think it was around about 9 months.
Yeah, and that's impressive. I think also relative to scale, right? And depends. Complexity in MuleSoft does not necessarily directly translate to complexity in Workato, and so what our experience has been is that actually there's a bigger onus on the planning side of things, and where we've gone into conversations where there's an expectation we'll look at RAML or the underlying build in Mule and try and I guess reverse engineer into Workato. It needs us to focus a little bit more on the BRDs and actually what the outcomes that are trying to be delivered are.
Yeah.
So more work in the planning, but the execution phase is swift. And there is one instance where we were looking at a client with a build in MuleSoft that had taken them years, obviously, to accumulate, but in one probably about 18 months to get there, and actually the execution to replicate the capability was about 45 days. The planning workup was a lot more. Obviously, it's like this transformation needed. You're making systems responsive. You're taking things from, I guess scheduled jobs into near real time.
Yeah,
You do need to think about the downstream implications of business users, which is broadly positive, I should add. But you make things faster, then there are some considerations to make.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think there's a question here for you, Ben, as well. What does the free migration assessment involve? How long does it take? And what do we get at the end?
Yeah, sure. So the assessment involves working with one of our consultants, myself or one of my colleagues, and one of our enterprise architects. We take a high level view of the configurations in the environment. We're usually assisted by an integration analyst specializing in said platform, whilst our enterprise architects are quite generalist. We also make sure we bring the right for the platform. We've got an extensive array of resources in our team. So think of it as a lightweight current state analysis. We also spend a bit of time with you, workshop, typically 60, 90 minutes, focusing on the that you out. That then helps us look at building a comparison, high-level design, high-level reference architecture, and an estimate, but also considering from the objective key results you're looking for, what phasing approaches are where you might want to make trade-offs. So it gives you a good view on the things you'll need to do before you need to give your notice to your current provider should you look to move. Lastly, it also gives us a blueprint to give you a really meaningful proof of concept that shows your highest value use cases delivered. So it gives you the fuel to start going and testing feasibility. So actually, I didn't answer. How long does it take? Usually in under 2 weeks. The engagement with you as a client is a couple of days, a few days, depending on scale.
Yeah. And there's a question here about migration. So would we need to rebuild all our existing MuleSoft flows from scratch, or can some be migrated automatically? So I'll let you come in on that as well, Ben. I think I've already talked about Aero and the fact that Aero does have the capability to produce integrations, recipes from business requirement documents. I guess maybe from a migration perspective, there's also the opportunity there that maybe those business requirements documents or design specifications can also be automatically migrated from MuleSoft code, for example. And I know we have some partners working on that kind of approach.
Yeah, and likewise, right? We have our own methodologies and tools, and certainly AI plays a really big role in helping us decipher and determine the detailed nuances of current configuration and build. So quite a substantial amount can be automated, but again, it places the emphasis on not lifting overly complex integration patterns and rebuilding that complexity into a new system. The thing that always resonates with me is when we look at we're picking MuleSoft a lot here, and that's the theme throughout our deck, isn't it? But when we look at Tibco or MuleSoft, those SOA style builds where everything's an API, you see so many that have been built for reuse, but have been reused maybe a handful of times. And so all of the effort and energy that goes into building these APIs for reuse, you have to question, is it really worth it? So I'd say on balance, yes, there is a heavy amount of automation that can be done to migrate, but um, if you take stock and you analyze your requirements properly and you understand the capability of the Workato platform, you utilize tools like Aero alongside a good enterprise architecture partner like ourselves, then you'll find you'll cut complexity out, which is going to cut cost in the long term and shorten that change cycle.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right, I think we're out of time now, but thank you to everyone who attended. And if you'd like to get in touch, please connect with myself or indeed Colin after. And yeah, we look forward to speaking with you in due course.